Now let's talk a little bit about some of the maybe downsides or possibly misconceptions about VA loans.
Mhm.
For example, I've worked with a lender before who said, we can do VA loans, but we really prefer to do conventional mortgage. And that's something I've heard with different lenders. And I ended up finding a different lender that specialized in VA loans because I felt that was the right product for me.
Mhm.
But let's talk a little bit about that misconception.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of misconceptions when it comes to that, and usually what it boils down to when you find a loan officer lender that is telling you that you shouldn't do it or trying to actually talk you out of it, it's usually going to be for a couple of different reasons. One of those is they say it's going to take longer.
Mhm.
Well, granted, sometimes VA loans can take a little bit more time because you actually have to go through the VA to order the appraisal. So you're at the mercy of whatever the turn times are for that VA appraiser. And so sometimes that process can take a little bit longer, but not all the time. And typically, I'm closing VA loans in the same amount of time that I'm closing conventional and FHA loans. So it once again comes down to working with a knowledgeable lender who knows how to do VA loans.
Okay. That sounds good. And that's actually what I ended up doing as well. Now, another common misconception is you can only use your VA loan once. Now, we talked a little bit about entitlements and we touched on that topic, but let's expand on that a little bit. Can you use it only once? And if not, what do you have to do to be able to use it again?
Yeah, yeah. You can definitely use it more than once. You can use it an unlimited amount of times. You just have to either free up your eligibility or you have to have enough remaining eligibility if you've already used it. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
So you talked about how you use a portion of your
hmm
eligibility. So
hmm
now, when you're buying a house with a VA loan, you can only use it for a residential property that you're going to live in.
Correct.
But
Primary
if
residence.
primary residence, and if I live in that house for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, and I decide, okay, my company's going to move me over here, or the military moves me, if I don't sell that one, and if I still have some remaining benefit, I could still go buy another house with that. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of those areas where it's especially important to have a knowledgeable lender because when you're talking about actually using your entitlement to buy more than one VA or more than one home using your
Mhm.
VA eligibility, it can get a little bit tricky to do the math, but it is absolutely possible. There's just variables that come into play as far as how much that you used, how much you have left,
Yeah.
and what the price ranges of the houses. But that's why it's so important not just to work with a knowledgeable VA lender, but also a realtor. So if you have a lender that is trying to say, don't do that, it's going to take longer, the realtor is telling you, no, you shouldn't do that. You should consider conventional or FHA because the seller isn't going to want to accept that. They're going to be less likely to take that on. Uh, don't be afraid to shop around and find someone else who's not going to give you misinformation. Because although it is true, there are some sellers, typically they're the ones that are represented by a realtor who is telling them they shouldn't accept
Okay.
the VA offer. So you're gonna come across that. But that's why it's important to shop around, not just for a lender, but for a realtor as well.
I think this is one of those topics that there are so many variables that the more information you have and the more people you talk to, the more resources you use, the more you self-educate, the more you're aware, the better you're going to be when it comes time to buy a house. Just being that educated consumer is going to be incredibly powerful for you.
100%.
Awesome. Well, I love that. Now let's talk about another common misconception. That might be approval rates, like getting a loan approved. Is there a difference between a loan approval rate? You mentioned a little bit about debt to income ratio and credit scores, et
Mhm.
cetera. Is how does that play with the VA loan, and is it easier, more difficult, or comparable to other types of home loans?
VA loans are notoriously easier to get approved for than
Okay.
conventional financing. Conventional financing, as I've referenced a few times, it requires better credit.
Mhm.
You're going to have more stringent underwriting, which includes debt to income ratios. And the VA, I like to consider VA underwriting more common sense underwriting. They're going to look at the big picture, whether it comes to let's say you have gaps in your employment. Let's say that your credit score is a little bit lower. Let's say that you've jumped around to different jobs and they haven't been in the same line of work. They're going to look at the big picture and they're going to take it case by case, and you're going to find that it's easier to actually be approved for a VA loan than most other ones.
Well, that's good to hear. Now let's address one more common misconception, or maybe it's a I'll just call it an observation right now. I've heard that many sellers don't like to deal with VA loans, and I don't know the truth behind that. Is that
Yeah.
something that some sellers, because they don't know the process, or they're how would you combat that, or what would you say about that?
Yeah, well, and it goes back to a lot of times that's the information that they're receiving from the listing agent. So the listing agent had maybe one bad experience with a VA loan where the appraisal didn't come back or the appraisal took longer, or maybe the lender wasn't a VA expert, and that actually had a snowball effect on the whole process. But I'm telling you, I said it at the beginning, VA loans are my favorite, and it's for a reason. It's a smooth process, and it's one of the best loans out there for the military community.
Wonderful. So if I'm a seller, I'm selling my house. Is there anything I need to be aware of for somebody who wants to use a VA loan to buy my house?
Now, that's a good question. You know, I would just say so every buyer should come in with a pre-approval letter.
Mhm.
First of all, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Check out who the pre-approval letter came through. Do a little bit of research as a seller to see if this company or this individual, because it doesn't take much to research online, if they have experience doing VA loans. And that would, for me, if I was a seller, that would put me at ease if I looked them up and I saw that they've done a lot of VA loans as a company or as an originator. Then yeah, but that's the due diligence that I would do.